Hello and welcome to episode 290 of Retro Encounter, RPGFan's weekly podcast of many topics. I'm Mike Sollosi, and this is one of our more spontaneous episodes, because instead of planning this months and months in advance, I planned this episode about 1 month in advance, because it's about the thing that I have been playing the most the past 30 days, Monster Hunter. Listeners might remember a 2018 episode called The Thrill of the Hunt, in which me and two others celebrated Monster Hunter and got excited for Monster Hunter World, which I think had just released. So this was in January or February of 2018. But now it is May or June of 2021, and we are going to talk about slightly different selection of Monster Hunter with a slightly different panel. So who's that panel? It is myself, and alongside me is Peter Triezenberg.
Hi, everybody.
And Dom Kim.
Hello, hello.
Now, Dom and Peter, the three of us are in different stages of our Monster Hunter journeys, and I want to take this episode to a little bit like the one from 3 years ago, where we're going to talk about what we love about Monster Hunter, what Monster Hunter we've been playing, because all three of us have been playing Monster Hunter recently, but not quite the same Monster Hunter or the same stages of Monster Hunter. So, and I'll say Monster Hunter again just because I've already said it 20 times in 3 sentences. But let's get into it. This episode is about Monster Hunter because I've been playing a lot of Monster Hunter Rise recently, and Peter, you mentioned to me that you've recently started Monster Hunter World, and Dom, a few months ago, you were really excited about doing a possible Monster Hunter World episode because you've been started that up, I want to say in the second half of 2020. So again, all three of us are in different stages of playing Monster Hunter, and I want to just talk about all of that. So, Dom, let's start with you. How did you start playing Monster Hunter? And tell me a little bit about maybe what's a typical recent hunt. Like, just to tell us about your story.
So for me, my story with Monster Hunter kind of began after I upgraded my PC. And a friend of mine who played World a lot was like, hey, you should come play World with me now that your computer can actually run the game. So
and around when was this?
I upgraded my computer around November-ish. Honestly, I was kind of expecting it's just one of those like co-op games I'm going to play for a couple weeks at most and then just, throw into the abyss of my Steam backlog. But it's like really one of those, wow, this game is like really fantastic, like moments where I could really lose myself like in the game again, because up until that point I started feeling the burnout from playing games, and like I could like play a game, but I could never really quite get into it the same way that I used to. But upon playing World, I like that feeling came back again, and yeah, I've been playing it daily ever since, pretty much.
Wow, and so this has been something like 7 or 8 months.
Yeah, approaching like 6 months. Yeah, 6-7 months now.
Cool. So, so you're at or near the end game content of World, which is that's a lot of hours. You don't need to give me a number, but playing it almost every day for 6 or 7 months, that can be, and Monster Hunter's World in particular is broad and deep. So, what is? Do you have a favorite weapon or favorite style?
Yeah. I started the game with the bow guns, because that was like just the most familiar thing for me at the time. But personally, I really enjoy the hammer because it is kind of my spirit weapon. I just love those, especially arenas with slopes in them, where I can just completely take advantage of and abuse the hell out of the spin attack that the hammer has.
The aerial windmill spin.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then like combat that into the clutch claw with Iceborne, or in Iceborne rather, and yeah, I just love doing that.
I'm also a hammer main, and what if I could tell you there was another Monster Hunter game that let you do that move on command without a slope?
Oh, I'm all ears.
But it's interesting that you would start with bowgun, because I think that the bowgun is one of the hardest weapons to start with, only because I mean, it's completely different from using the melee weapons, but also you need a bunch of extra stuff when you're doing a bowgun, like learning all the different types of ammo, and you're spending money on ammo, and and like your inventory is going to be sort of shaped very differently. I have messed around with bowguns before, but I always think of it as like an ideal second or third weapon because you should have just a supply of materials and zenny just so you can actually make the bowgun stuff you want.
Oh yeah.
Was it a struggle like just having the gunpowder and the huskberries or whatever doing early bowgun?
I think the problem for bowguns, I feel like, is how do you call it? I feel like a lot of them are balanced around like their level 3, like their highest tier ammos, and not having access to those for a long time really, I don't know. Like my time playing with bowguns was pretty difficult, simply because I feel they traded a lot of power away early on for the late game power you can potentially get once you like have the high end gear. But like ammo and otherwise, I think World did a pretty decent job. Like every hunt you start, if you just go into the what do you call it, the supply crate, they usually have a bunch of ammo for you there already. And it's usually stuff I was using anyways, like spread ammo or pierce ammo. So actually, I don't think the supply part of it was really a big issue for me. It was more just the general power level early on.
When I first started playing Monster Hunter in the PSP era, supply was a big issue because I mean you don't have a separate ammo pouch. Everything just goes into your general
Yeah.
inventory, and I never had enough room for the stuff I wanted. I would run out of the right stuff all the time because like you should bring ammo and crafting materials for the next ammo and kind of deal. And I only really got into bowgunning when there was a couple monsters that were just way too hard or I really struggled to properly hammer or greatsword or sword and shield, which were the three weapons I used the most back in the PSP days. But I would like to talk more bowguns and weapon styles with you, Dom. But let's move on to Peter first. Peter, you started playing more recently than Dom did. So how has your Monster Hunter journey been so far?
So far, it's been really good. A bit of background. For the longest time, I was very much of the opinion that I would not enjoy Monster Hunter. I had a pretty limited experience with the series. I tried playing the demo for 3 Ultimate on the Wii U, and didn't like it. I had a friend who was really trying to talk me into playing Monster Hunter 4 on the 3DS, and I was just kind of like,
I think
and
would it have been 4 Ultimate because I don't think North America got regular 4.
it was probably 4 Ultimate. Yeah, I mean, I'm just generalizing. Yeah,
Yeah, it would have been the same as 4, but with all the extra content. Because
right,
most
right.
Iceborne is a little different actually, but most of the time when there's a second Monster Hunter release, it's an expanded version of the original. They've been doing it since oh geez, I think since the PS2 era.
Yeah, so it really wasn't until they announced Monster Hunter World at E3, which was just we were in the press conference at that point. It was a really awesome show.
Yep,
And then I was like,
that would have been 2017, and you and I
17,
were
yeah.
in in the Sony auditorium together for that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it was just like, okay, and I was like, okay, that looks cool. And a lot of the quality of life fixes they made, some of the adjustments, really made the game seem more appealing to me. I still never really got into it until I got my PS5, which, for those who don't know, the PlayStation 5, if you are a PlayStation Plus member, you have access to a collection of games that were previously included on PS Plus, and one of those is Vanilla Monster Hunter World. So at that point, I was just like, hearing people talk about the new game, Rise, and the enthusiasm rubbed off on me. I think Eva and Mark, other RPGFan staffers, were playing World at the time. I was just like, okay, you know what? This is meant to be. So I downloaded it, and I've been really enjoying it. I'm still relatively early on. I got the Iceborne expansion separately,
Mm.
so I could have the whole experience, and I'm still slowly making my way through the main story. I think I'm about to head into the first siege mission with Zora Magdaros. Um,
Okay, so that's around the halfway point of regular world, I think. What was the last new monster you hunted?
and Anjanath.
All right. Yeah, that's so you're not at high rank stuff yet.
No, not yet.
Does that sound about right, Dom? Like around the halfway
Yeah,
point of a vanilla world?
yeah, that sounds about right.
Huh,
Zora
interesting. I guess I'm
Magdaros.
further than I thought in the story then. But I mean, the story is. I'm not playing this for the engaging plot.
No.
I'm playing with my handler and her creepy, uncanny face. Um, no, I'm playing this because the world design is really interesting and tight, and it makes it just makes the environments feel like a living ecosystem. I like following monsters through their habitats and like watching the systems engage. If you're a very systems driven type of gamer, I think Monster Hunter, especially World, will appeal to you because as I'm discovering, it's very fun finding a weapon type you like and learning a monster's like path through the environment and tracking them down and learning their attack patterns and having them engage with stuff that you find in the environment. Like, I guess because there was like a Final Fantasy crossover, I was hunting a Baroth,
Mm-hmm.
the big old rock dinosaur, and there's a Cactuar from Final Fantasy just chilling out in the environment, and I hit it on accident, and that killed the Baroth with 1,000 needles, and I'm like, okay, that is awesome.
I hope I haven't repeated this on other podcasts, but there was a Final Fantasy 14 crossover in 2018 that resulted in things like cactuars in the environment, and it was a permanent crossover and not a limited time one, so you can still play uh, that in Monster Hunter World and in Final Fantasy 14.
Mm-hmm.
I believe in addition to the cactuar thing, there you can fight a giant Kulu Yaku that finds a crystal and wields the crystal like it does eggs or rocks in the game. And also fight a giant Final Fantasy behemoth, which was one of the last things I attempted to fight when I was binging on Monster Hunter World super hard in 2018. But I never fought it, and then get dragoon armor from that battle.
Yeah,
Uh,
see, I feel like I'm gonna wind up wanting to do that.
and
Um,
but then around the level 70 content in Final Fantasy 14, you can hunt a Rathalos, and
mhm.
in the extreme version of the Rathalos trial, it adds Monster Hunter rules where you get a game over if 3 people die, and there's no area of effect telegraphs. You have to learn the Rathalos's patterns properly.
Yep, and no healing outside of the mega potions that they give
Yes.
you.
Yes, they give you mega potions and you can't heal other than the mega potions, which is why that fight is almost ideally done with a tank and 3 DPS and no healer because suddenly in that FF14 trial everyone is an equally good healer. With apologies to white mage mains.
Honestly, not to get too into FF14 stuff, but Eva and I have been farming that Rathalos fight because we both want the mount,
Oh,
which
the,
is
the normal version or the extreme version?
the extreme version because
Oh, nice.
the extreme version is the one with the mount, which you can
Right.
either get by farming it 50 times, and collecting 50 scales, or it's an incredibly rare drop. We have not gotten it to drop, but that fight is really interesting because if you're running it at unsynced, we're all running it as level 80 characters in level 70 content.
So that makes it a lot easier.
It makes it a lot easier. I would even actually say it makes it a lot easier. It makes it slightly easier because the Rathalos will do this thing where it targets your character for a massive AOE fireball, and it will do this 3 times in a row. And your only recourse at that point is to get. I think in the synced version you're supposed to stack up, but honestly, it makes more sense for you to take each fireball, mega potion through it each time, and then have the rest of the party just wail on it while it's focused on you, because it's the only time it is guaranteed to be targeting one player. So it's interesting, but everyone who's doing it has to be on the same page. We've had a couple runs where someone who joined us got really mad at us for like having a different strat than they were used to.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but that totally fits. Like having to do weird Monster Hunter exploitative strats in FF14 and having to do FF14 AOE stuff in Monster Hunter World is absolutely something that they did intentionally with those fights. Because you basically have to dodge a giant meteor AOE in World when you fight the behemoth by timing. Like either standing behind an obstacle or timing an invincible dodge just in time, which is again slightly more MMO than Monster Hunter players are used to.
We point out the similarities in those crossover content, but really Monster Hunter has a lot of MMO in its DNA. I find it's not really an MMO, strictly speaking. It does have a heavy multiplayer component. And I think that's part of the fun, because like you can join up with other players, and World does a good job of like having like the ad hoc, like people can jump into your missions if you let them, your quests, and you can jump into theirs if they fire up a flare. So it really does kind of give a sense that like you have like an active community of hunters like looking to with the same goals, and it's quite fun.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. You can solo everything completely yourself if you want, but the multiplayer is so fun and adds such a dynamic to it that if someone tells me that they only play Monster Hunter solo, I kind of think like, man, what are you doing? Like that you're defeating the point a little bit. My regular Monster Hunting partner for a long time only liked playing with others if they were like same room with him, but playing World got him to embrace the online a little more, which was a relief because he can be quite stubborn about his gaming tendencies and opinions. But Peter, do you have a favorite weapon or a favorite kind of hunt that you do?
So far, I am really digging the longsword. I find it to be a good balance of, like, it's not as slow as other weapons, but it still feels like it packs a punch, especially when you build up your gauge and start using your R2 attacks. Which are these like big sweeping attacks. I'm curious to try out Greatsword at some point because I do like the idea of like, having this a little more power even if it is slower, and possibly trying Gun Lance because I'm very curious.
I haven't done a lot of Gun Lance, but recently playing Rise, Gun Lance has a couple moves that are so insane that I am more interested in Gun Lance than ever. You can basically like hold it behind you and jet forward and do like super rocket dashes with it now. You can basically Gun Lance rocket jump in Rise, which is real wild. But this is amusing because like we have a hammer main and a longsword main, and those are the two weapons I use the most in Monster Hunter World. I'll go in my own background a little bit. My best friend, who is from Panama, one time in the late 2000s visited some family in Panama and came back playing some Monster Hunter Freedom 2 with them, saying, "Hey, you and I need to play more Monster Hunter." And I'm like, "All right, sure, I'll play this weird PSP thing that I've read about in magazines a little bit." And again, this was I think 2008. My first Monster Hunter game was Monster Hunter Freedom 2, and when the expanded version of Freedom 2, which is called Freedom Unite in the West, was like coming out in Japan, I was following that news story in 2009 basically, and like again, like the cover monster for that one was Nargacuga, and I was like, but they were translating it as Naruga Karuga back in 2009. And then I played that a lot when it came out in 2010 worldwide. So just hundreds of hours of Monster Hunter from 2008 to 2010, mostly with my best friend. And I sort of dropped off that when he moved. And for a while we even tried to play PSP Monster Hunter online with a PS3 application called Ad Hoc Party, where use your PS3 as a mobile hotspot to play local multiplayer online. If it sounds messy, it 100% is.
Woof. That sounds like a time.
Yeah, it was. We got it working a couple times, but it did not last our ad hoc party adventure. But and then I tried playing the third and fourth generation Monster Hunter games a little bit. I followed the Japanese release of their last PSP game, which was Portable Third. It's the one that debuted Zenogre. I think it came out in 2010 or 2011 in Japan, but that one never came out in the United States. So I have an import copy of it, but have not put a ton of hours into it. I tried playing Monster Hunter Tri for the Wii and did not like it at all. I completely skipped the Gen 4 Monster Hunter games, but eventually tried to play Generations on the 3DS and thought it was all right, but not really what I wanted at the time. That was after World was revealed in 2017, but before I started playing World in 2018. But then Monster Hunter World came around. My friend that had also skipped Gens 3 and 4 with me got back into it, and I played a frankly irresponsible amount of Monster Hunter World in 2018. Some like we're talking. I really only played it for about 6 or 7 months, but I cleared almost all the content. We got into there was a lot of Kulve Taroth hunts. I got into. I think I stopped playing. Around like tempered elder dragons, like tempered Teostra and Kushala Daora. This would have been summer of 2018, and I tried the behemoth hunts several times. I think we cleared it once, but I hated it so much or struggled with it so much that I never really tried to farm it, like tried to really grind at the behemoth. But that was around when I stopped playing. Was like in a month or two after Behemoth dropped in summer of 2018 is when my Monster Hunter World career ended. So I haven't done any of the Iceborne content, but I had a lot of fun with Monster Hunter World in 2018 and on the PSP in 2008-2010. So then fast forward to 2021. And Monster Hunter Rise comes out. It looks good. I'm interested in it. I watched the trailers of the new monsters excitedly, but I'm like, I'm not going to play this. I got a podcast to run. I want to play a bunch of backlog RPGs in 2021. I don't need this in my life. But my regular Monster Hunter playing partner, who has not owned a Nintendo console since the Game Boy Color. Again, he never had. I think he had a Super Nintendo and a Game Boy Color in around, let's say, 1999. He bought a Switch just to play Rise because he felt the Monster Hunter itch again. And I, of course, already had a Switch, but he talked me into picking up a copy of Rise for myself. And this would have been, I think the game had been out for a few weeks. This was like middle of April. And now I'm over 100 hours in. I have been playing the bejesus out of Monster Hunter Rise. Mm-hmm. I have cleared every hunt in the game except for Valstrax. I just unlocked Valstrax and beat all of the story missions and a couple of the Apex hunts. So and Valstrax was added in the May 28th update, or maybe May 27th update. So I am near the end of what has come out for that game, but I'm having so much fun. Rise might be my favorite Monster Hunter now. I'm not sure, but it's at least a debate. And I'm having a blast. But my Monster Hunter playing style has sort of evolved over the years. I think I mentioned in the PSP, I played a lot of Great Sword and Hammer. And then Dom, you were talking about trying the bowguns early. I hated the bowguns early, but I had so much difficulty hunting Plesioth and Gravios with the hammer and greatsword because I don't know. I mean, there's a legendary the Plesioth's hitbox in old Monster Hunter games is legendary for they'll do a hip check while you're in a different part of the room and you'll still get hit by it. Yeah, I was so frustrated trying to melee a couple monsters that I picked up the great bowgun. I'm sorry, the heavy bowgun, just for those hunts, and it ended up working beautifully. Using Thunder Pierce on Plesioth and Water Pierce on Gravios is way easier than trying to hammer them, and that evolved that way. And in World, I mained Hammer again because Hammer is my spirit weapon. I am a graduate of the School of Bonk, but I also played a lot of Longsword because I wanted a weapon just for tail cutting, and Longsword got an upgrade in World. A Longsword feels good in World, but it's building that meter to get the red glow, and then building the meter to get your R2 combo. going, and then trying to sort of keep your meters high and balance between more careful overhead swings with the fancy R2 combo. It is R2. I'm not misremembering that, right, Peter?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah,
right. Okay,
yeah, it is.
That's really fun. But then in Rise, I decided I wanted to avoid Longsword a little bit, because Longsword is by far the most popular weapon in Rise. They gave it a really good free counter and a couple really good extra moves that it's I don't, this wasn't the case in World, but it is by far the most common weapon in Rise. So I decided to avoid Longsword. I'm still hammering, but my the weapon I have sort of taken on as my second main in Rise is the Sword and Shield, because the combos are really fun, and it has a move called Metsu Shoryugeki, which is basically a giant shield uppercut that can counter any move, and when you reach the top of the uppercut, you can either descend with like a downward shield punch or a downward sword stab, and it deals an incredible amount of impact damage. So you can do almost as much knocking out with a sword and shield as you can with a hammer. Almost, but not quite as much. So I love the Sword and Shield in Rise, and I have been mostly playing Hammer and SNS, but having a great time. I played a little bit of SNS on the PSP, but that was just for fighting Copper Blanganga, or I hate the name Blanganga, so I usually called him a Big Blango or a Boss Blango, because Blangos are like the regular monkeys and the Blangongas are like the king monkeys, and Rajang, just because those two guys were annoying to hammer a greatsword. So similar to my hatred of Plesioth and Gravios, but not quite as dramatic. But that's kind of Monster Hunter in a nutshell. It's had 5 generations of games developed across 2 separate teams in Capcom, with 14 weapon types, hundreds of monsters, and new environments and new styles and wrinkles with every new game. There are 14 weapon types, and I think in Iceborne they have over 100 large monsters as boss fights, with the base game being around 60 to 65 range, and Rise has I think around the same amount as vanilla Monster Hunter World, around 60 to 65 large monsters, but they're adding more every month, and it will eventually have its Freedom Unite World Iceborne Super Turbo version in probably a year or a year and a half. But I mean that's what it is. Monster Hunter is about exploring these crazy environments and settings, mastering the weapons of your choice, and learning the patterns of and behaviors of these monsters to sort of master a set of boss fights. And that loop, and the loop is only really fight monsters, make stronger weapons and armor, fight more, bigger, different monsters. But it's once you get into it, that loop is hypnotic. And and Dom, you've been playing it every day for months. So you've definitely learned that, and Peter, you're at least learning that. Dom, if you're hunting, like what are you hunting now? Like, is there a current armor or weapon set you're working on?
I mean, I've pretty much gotten the quote unquote best armor in Iceborne already, so I'm just doing hunts for fun now. But I mean, I'm pretty much just trying to, I guess, do the Dark Souls thing and solo clear the bosses.
Oh boy! So how far have you gotten?
I've gotten to. I'm still struggling with Rathalos, but I've managed to clear up to Alatreon.
Oh, so you're only struggling with the hardest monster in the entire series. Oh, goody. There are 3 monsters in Monster Hunter that are called the Forbidden Monsters, and that's because Capcom does not acknowledge them on any guide material or promotional material. It will show trailers of them when they release on new systems, but they're sort of Capcom just puts them in games, says these are the hardest monsters. We're not gonna tell you how to fight them. These are only for the challenge hounds, and those monsters are Fatalis and its variants, Alatreon, which you mentioned, and another black dragon called Dire Moralis, which is not in Monster Hunter World. So yeah, Dom, you are solo clearing the hardest monsters in the whole series. That is where you are in the game right now. I'm not quite there. I did clear Fatalis a couple times in the PSP games with weird exploits and hunting online, but never even fought it in World because I don't think it was added until Iceborne.
Yeah. It was the final post-release monster update, Fatalis, which was in
Sounds about right.
October.
Was it? Is it only the black one, or do they also add crimson and white?
It's only the black one, but I think the community is trying to make some sort of mod for like the other variants, or they have already. But officially, it's only black Fatalis in the game.
The crimson one is basically way more dragon elemental nonsense, and white is a lot more lightning. But they're similar. I mean, in appearance wise, I think like the white one is supposed to be a very old Fatalis, so it has more like beard like hair. And the crimson one, I think, comes with one horn broken because it's like some extra angry Fatalis.
Sounds about right.
Like
Rajang without its tail for the Furious variation.
Right, or the Bloodbath Diablos for a couple of the Gen 4 games that has a scar over its eye and one broken horn and with its second horn being massively overgrown. Yeah, I think the Japanese name for it was Massacre Diablos. So I was like, before it came out, before Generations Ultimate came out in English, I was reading articles like, oh yeah, Massacre Diablos, final encounter in the Switch Monster Hunter game. I'm like, Jesus Christ, I don't want to fight anything that has Massacre as its adjective. And Diablos is already an aggressive monster, so imagine just the most aggressive Diablos that's ever been, and that's what you're looking at with a Massacre / Bloodbath Diablos. Peter, have you fought a Diablos yet? Because I think that if you haven't, you probably are soon. I think you probably just unlocked one after, or maybe just after the Zora Magdaros fight.
Yeah, I haven't fought it yet, but yeah, I think it's coming up because I've been like poking around that zone for a while. Looking, for Baroth and a couple other monsters, and there are like signs of it that it's there. It's just not actually a mission yet.
But have you ever run into monsters that are sort of way above your level, but you just run into them hunting for something else?
Yes, so the Rathian can show up in Ancient Forest, and so I've been hunting Todi Kadachi, the big electric flying squirrel thing.
Yep.
Because I really like its armor set, and I want to upgrade it. So I farmed everything I needed to get it, and now I'm just doing hunts to get the spheres I need. But,
that sounds like a Monster Hunter like personally established quest to me. I've been there. It's like ooh, I kind of like this thing, and I kind of need to upgrade my armor. I'll just before I progress, I'll just hunt a little more of this guy. Like I've 1000% been there.
But I think I can't remember if it was an investigation or an expedition, which we need to talk about Monster Hunter and its use of basically interchangeable terminology to mean different things.
Oh yeah.
But basically during that fight, the Rathian was in the Ancient Forest, and they kept getting into fights. Which is neat. Like from a gameplay standpoint, I think it's really neat that two monsters can like get into fights with each other. But at the same time, it's just like, okay, I want to hunt this thing, but this big freaking dragon keeps descending from on high and wrecking its ship.
That was something that World expanded upon a lot, because in the old Monster Hunter games before World, monsters did not interact in the same way. The settings were not contiguous. They were divided into zones with loading times in between a lot of areas. But World introduced this contiguous, no loading screen setting for all of its major maps. It had more interactables with the environment, and monsters would interact with each other and the environment more. So you could do stuff in World that you couldn't dream of in the older games, like I don't know, setting off a miniature avalanche by shooting some suspended stones and having them deal a lot of damage. You can like by attacking some roots at the top of the waterfall in the Ancient Forest, you can make a giant rush of water knock whatever you're fighting off the waterfall, including Rathian and Rathalos, I think. And also it improves things like inventory management and some basic actions of combat so much that it's so hard for me to go back to old Monster Hunter. I'm not sure I ever want to, even though I've experimented a couple times, like that copy of Monster Hunter Generations for the 3DS that I bought in late 2017. Like I've gone back to that just to mess around, but it's like, oh no, I don't want to do this at all. No, back. This is it's hard to go back once you really get into the 5th generation Monster Hunter games, and I've been messing around, skirting around a little bit. Rise and World are not separate generations because Monster Hunter has always operated with two different teams. The first team was originally headed by Ryozo Tsujimoto, who's the grandson of the founder of Capcom. There's a bunch of Capcom founder family as executives and designers in the company, and I think he sort of has been the lead executive producer behind Monster Hunter for something like 15 years, almost since the beginning, and then. They made the first Monster Hunter PSP game as a port of the PS2 game, and it was headed by a guy named, I forget his first name, but it's Ichinose-san is the guy who has always been the head of the portable Monster Hunter teams. So for the first couple generations, like the main team was on the PS2, while the portable team made the PSP games. And Monster Hunter exploded in popularity in Japan on the PSP. The second and third PSP games, I should say I think Freedom, what is it? The expansion second generation game and the third generation PSP game were the top two selling Monster Hunter games ever for a long time until World came out. So for a while, Monster Hunter sort of lived in the portable systems. And in the third generation, the main team worked on the Wii and Wii U, while the portable team stayed in the PSP. In the fourth generation, both the main team and the portable team were focused on the 3DS. So they were sort of all technically portable, but they were still in the sort of Team 1, Team 2 attitude. But now, the main team made Monster Hunter World, which started out as PS4, Xbox One, and then eventually had a PSP port. And the portable team made Monster Hunter Rise, which is on the Switch and will be getting a PSP port next year.
PC.
PC.
Yeah, I'm sorry, PC.
I would be incredibly impressed if they got them to run on a PSP.
Me too. I would probably have to get a new PSP because I think all three of the ones I have in storage right now are broken. If you were a PSP person that played a lot of like Dissidia or Monster Hunter Freedom, you probably have more than one PSP.
Dissidia.
They were not the most durable machines. But Ichinose is the director of Rise. He's been the director of all the ones on the portable team. But I think Tsujimoto did not direct World or Iceborne. Now he's kind of like a series main executive guy, and some longtime Monster Hunter designers were the project leads on World and Iceborne. And the two teams, they share staff and materials and resources a lot, of course, and like they'll bring monsters that were in one game into the other team's games, and there's a lot of crossover, but they've always had different directors and sort of different focuses, and the main series games are usually more grand, like you feel like you're more sort of a like part of a mission. And they really focus on like the drama of introducing monsters and hunts, while the portable games are a little bit cozier. Instead of being on a big mission, you're usually just defending a village that's beset by monsters, and that the monsters are a little bit more grounded in the main series games, and it'll have more dinosaurs and leviathans, while the PSP ones will have more weird dragons and stuff that just seems impossible, that almost feel too outlandish for World. And I think it's just the attitudes of the different directors. Like the portable games will get a little sillier, and the main series games try to be a little bit more like you're hunting monsters that could be real things.
The portable games are where we got a Jet Engine Dragon, right?
Yeah, yes. The Jet Engine Dragon and the Bloodbath Diablos are the sort of two late game bosses of the last one. The other end game boss in the last portable one from Gen 4 is a mantis spider that stitches together the ruins of an ancient civilization to make a giant mecha that's like looks like an Egyptian pharaoh kind of deal. So yeah, that's the,
all right.
Yeah. It's like a giant mantis spider that silk binds a bunch of like old weaponry from an ancient war together into a mecha, and that's one of the final boss encounters of the Gen 4 portable games. The portable games get a little wilder than the main series games in terms of monster designs.
You're telling me Paul W.S. Anderson didn't choose this thing to put in the movie? Huh.
It's called an
Come
Atal
on, man.
It's called Atal Ka, if you're curious.
That makes sense.
And also like they added that sort of mechanics kind of like the Atel Ka for the next portable game, which was Rise, because now in Rise you have little fireflies that follow you around called wire bugs that you use like spider silk grappling hooks, and you can Spider-Man your way around maps with your bugs, and you have a little silk bug meter that limits it a little bit. And also, I mean, Monster Hunter has always had cat buddies and those were introduced in the PSP games, and they added
Yes.
they added dog buddies in Rise as well,
Yep.
so just to make traveling around a little bit easier. So like World is still focused a little bit on the grand adventure and the ritual of Monster Hunter, while Rise is more about we'll just give them more powers and more silly things to do and let you get to the monster hunting faster, in a way that like it feels more arcadey than Monster Hunter World, and which is part of why I'm like it still has all the world improvements like the contiguous zones and the better inventory and a couple of monsters from World, including Peter's current quest. Toby Kadachi is one of the holdover monsters into Rise, but it definitely goes a little sillier and a little more anime, and I'm not sure which I like better, but I'm having so much fun with Rise that I might be leaning that way. So I know you guys haven't played Rise yet, but are you interested? Do you think that will be part of your Monster Hunter future?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Once Rise comes out on PC next year.
Oh, you mean PSP?
Put it on
I'm
Vita.
I'm definitely thinking of picking it up.
It's the easiest Monster Hunter just because they give you so much more power and more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Like even just hunting the same monsters in World versus Rise, like the Anjanats in Rise are easier to deal with than the ones in World, because now I can wire bug my way above them and do the flippy dippy hammer spinny whenever I have one bug on my meter, instead of having to wait for exactly the right shape slope nearby. And one of the new hammer silk bug moves is a giant impact crater that deals so much damage that whenever I have enough meter for it, I don't think of doing anything else with the hammer. But it's a little bit thin on content, because when you get sort of to end game in Monster Hunter World, you fight tempered versions of certain monsters. They give you they sort of stretch out the quest volume a little bit, in ways that it's really hard to see the bottom of the pool when you dive into Monster Hunter World Endgame. But with Monster Hunter Rise, like once I started fighting the endgame monsters, I kind of finished all of them except for Valstrax, which I haven't gotten to yet. And then that's kind of it. Like it's more just hunt whatever you want, and then take the materials from your favorite hunts and try to get your best random, the strongest charm you can in the randomly generated charm system. Instead of having random armor decorations, they have, like in World, they have random talismans, which is, I think, a slightly better system, because it's annoying trying not getting the decorations you want in World. It's a little bit. There's still an end game grind for random upgrades, but it's for your accessory slot and not for your armor decoration slots.
Right.
Going from World to Rise, but they have been continuously upgrading the game. They added 6 monsters in the April update and 3 monsters in the May update, with more to come. And one of the ones they added in the April update was Basil Juice, a late monster in Monster Hunter World. And Peter, we were talking about how Raytheons sometimes crash your early hunts. Monster Hunter's been doing that for decades, and maybe the king party crasher of them all is Basil Juice, which is a monster that they don't tell you about in World, but he just starts showing up in your hunts when you get to the around the 60 or 70% mark of the main story. And he's a special boy that I would love to talk about more. But even back in the PSP days, the way they introduce the signature monster to you is they make you go on an unimaginably easy quest. You have to massacre popos, which are slow mountain yaks, basically. You have to get a couple popo materials and then take them back to base. But without telling you, there's also a Tigrex in the area, and because Tigrex is the cover monster in Monster Hunter Freedom 2 on the PSP, and the way they sort of introduce you to the danger of being hunted by a monster instead of doing the hunting is have you do an easy popo quest while being chased by a Tigrex, and Monster Hunter's been doing this forever. Tigrex, famously Devil Joe in Generation 3 is a bit of a party crasher. Definitely Basil Juice in Generation 5. But that is something that's always happened, and it's just sort of part of the cheekiness of how that team does. They know what the community likes and dislikes, and they'll push their buttons in ways that I think is great. It's the way that the team has evolved and how they try to make every generation have you feel more powerful, and continuously making cool new monsters, but still never neglecting what's fun about Monster Hunter is just inspiring. I have had so much fun with Monster Hunter Rise that whenever there's any update and they're like, hey, we're bringing back one monster from a previous generation, I'll be excited for it no matter what it is, just because it'll be something new to do in the game. But I don't know if they'll continue this pace, because adding 6 monsters in the April update was staggering, and I think they're going to slow down from that. But let's say that you guys get into Monster Hunter Rise, say, next year. What's something that you love from World or an older game, if you've done research, that you hope makes it into Rise that isn't there right now? It can be anything from a monster to a setting to literally anything. And if you want clarifying questions, I'm here for you, because I obsessively research Monster Hunter and can probably answer them.
I do think the cover monster from Iceborne, Velkhana, is really cool looking.
Oh yeah, that is an ice lady that does all kinds of I don't know, maybe like a Gray Fairy Tale or a Marvel's Iceman kind of ice barrier making. Is that a fair comparison, Dom? Because you've hunted more Velkhana than I have.
In traditional me fashion, it reminds me of Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier from Yu-Gi-Oh. So sure. Right away, I'm just going to be like, yeah, I want that. So,
is the Velkhana fight a fun one? Because I never really played Iceborne, so I never got to hunt a Velkhana.
I'd say I'd say her tempered version is the best fight, because the base version is a bit too easy. And her arc-tempered version is just absolutely hell on earth. So I'd say her tempered version is the best version. But I do appreciate the Velkhana fight. I think it's a very solid, just a very well-designed fight overall.
I mean, I'm not the biggest Monster Hunter challenge hound, but I have hunted a couple like I've done the tempered double basil juice from the Monster Hunter World End game. But I stopped hunting around tempered elder dragons, so I don't know how well I could handle an arc tempered Velkhana, but that does sound pretty good.
I guess in Rise I'd really like some of the elder dragons from World that I enjoyed a lot, or an Iceborne like Namiel, or I guess Nergigante as well.
Okay, now I definitely know Nergigante. I farmed little Nergigante. He's the cover monster of World. But Namiel I never fought. Is that the sort of water thunder one?
Yeah, it's the jellyfish underwater themed monster.
Right.
And it's just fantastic. I love it. It's such a unique take on like what you might think of as a dragon as well.
I have not hunted
fire, it's water.
I've not hunted a Namiel, but I have seen it appear on favorites lists before, is how I'm most familiar with it.
Yeah.
I haven't fought it yet, but I do love Nergigante just because it subscribes to the design ethos of add more spikes. Yeah. And I vibe with that. It's a very big, angry, spiky boy.
My favorite new monster in Rise is probably the cover monster, Magnamalo. Which is a samurai tiger hellfire armor thing full of blades where there should not be blades. But it reminds me of the Nergigante fight a lot, because Magnamalo hits hard as hell and is very aggressive and predatory in its behaviors. But like Nergigante, they are never unfair with Magnamalo. They with both of those monsters, they give you a tell for every kind of move. You'll see Nergigante's wing or foreleg lower depending on which direction the shoulder tackle is going to be. And both of those are monsters that they hit way too hard for the armor level you probably have when you first meet them, but everything is telegraphed in a way that is challenging but feels like a fair challenge. I think both Magnamalo and Nergigante are sort of walls in the mid game or just beginning of the end game in their respective games, but are awesome. My favorite monster in Rise is it's either Gosharag or Magnamalo, and Gosharag is a sort of a like in between a Yeti and a polar bear and a Japanese mountain ogre that makes swords and clubs for itself out of ice. That's kind of awesome. And
I dig that.
And if you're stunned, and it's in range of you, it'll lumber towards you, dragging its ice blade on the ground next to it, like it's Jason Voorhees. It's awesome. I love Gosharag. but Gosharag is a little on the easier side for a second half monster, while Magnamello is a little on the harder side for a second half monster, at least personally. But I enjoy both of them so much that I made multiples of their weapons. The Gosharag hammer is just a giant ice club. It's beautifully simple in its design.
There you go.
I can get behind that.
Yeah, no, you trust me. You're gonna want hammers out of both of those guys, Dom. But for me personally, I think we mentioned this off air, or maybe it was earlier in the episode. But I think one monster that is very special to a lot of people, but I've only hunted a couple times, and is not in Rise, but I want in Rise, is the Gore Magala. Now, Monster Hunter games have bad stories. They are not interesting. Like in the story of Monster Hunter World is basically you're a colonizer and dragons are getting weird. And the story of Rise is there's a big rampage of monsters happening, and we think it's because these two dragons are trying to have sex. And that's most of it. But and we talked about how early in Monster Hunter Freedom 2, you encounter this Tigrex, but you don't get to finally take down a Tigrex until much later in the story. In Monster Hunter 4, it's the Monster Hunter story that I hear that gets the most compliments for me, someone on the outside looking in that never played Monster Hunter 4 or 4 Ultimate. But you encounter a Gore Magala pretty early. It sort of hunts you and party crashes you a couple times, kind of like we described the Devil Joe or the Tigrex doing. But eventually you do get to defeat it around the midpoint of the game. But the Gore Magala is also making other monsters go weird because the hairs or scales that it sheds give monsters a virus that changes their behaviors. But then after you defeat the Gore Magala, you encounter it again as sort of the final boss or near final boss of Monster Hunter 4, and it turns out the Gore Magala is not a weird black dragon, or a weird black wyvern. It's an adolescent elder dragon that's in the middle of shedding its skin. And it sheds the weird black skin that was hanging off it like a cloak and becomes a giant golden dragon called Shigaru Magala. And the final boss is after you beat the dragon you've been hunting most of the game, it comes back as this crazy golden god. And I've heard that fight and that arc of hunts as being like the coolest part of any Monster Hunter story. So I would love to hunt a Gore Magala and maybe also a Shigaru Magala in Rise. But I've never really gotten deep into those. I hunted a Gore Magala a couple times in Monster Hunter Generations. That's around when I stopped playing the game. So I would love to do that with wire bugs and a Palamute by my side this time.
I love how the dogs are called Palamutes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the cat general species are called felines, but with a Y instead of an I, and dogs are called canines with a Y instead of an I again. But the ones that you partner up with are palicos as the cats and palamutes as the dogs. And you get to raise them and have them run missions for you. In Monster Hunter World, they cook for you. It's the dogs and cats in this game are very, very good boys and girls.
I'm curious about because I have Monster Hunter Stories on the 3DS, and the sequel is coming out as well. It's a very Monster Hunter heavy year. But those are like turn-based RPGs with more of a Pokemon-esque like monster collecting aspect,
yep.
Which is definitely my jam. I'm a little because I am not enthralled by Monster Hunter World's story, so I don't think that the plot of basically making a more Saturday morning cartoon version of it is going to win me over. But at the same time, I think those games look really cute, and I like the art style, and I am very much curious to play it.
I mean, it's spoiling the very beginning of Monster Hunter Stories. I've played it, but I didn't finish it. I kind of would like to finish it later this year. Is like at the very beginning, you find a baby Rathalos, and and then a monster attacks your village. The baby Rathalos tries to save you, but falls into a ravine or something, and then you meet the baby Rathalos as an adult, and you team up with it again to try and save your village. Is kind of the beginning of the game. I hope that wasn't too much of a story, but man, that baby Rathalos is so cute right from minute 10 when you find it.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to trying it out. And then, as far as other Monster Hunter content that I have consumed goes, I think it's time to talk about that movie.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
That's the Paul Anderson that's much campier than the other Paul Anderson, right?
Yep, this is Paul Resident Evils 1 through 6 and Event Horizon Anderson. Not
Paul the Master Anderson.
Not Paul There Will Be Blood Anderson.
Right.
That's my go-to. But yeah, I love that movie. But no, but you know what? I also don't mind Paul W.S. Anderson. Like, for all of the flack he gets, which is rightfully so, he makes a lot of very B-grade movies. He's a competent action director, and the fact that his whole career has basically been making movies about his wife, Mia Jovovich, and being like, look how awesome and hot my wife is. And like, you know what? I respect the hell out of that.
And you know, I mean, I'm not that familiar with Paul W.S. Anderson's oeuvre. Again, I think I've probably seen an equal number of Paul Thomas Anderson and Paul W.S. Anderson movies. But at least in those Underworld movies, Mia Jovovich is super cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, she's great.
That's
She
true.
is she's a good action star, I think. And so the Monster Hunter movie is weird because it's like a weird isekai plot where like Mia Jovovich is the head of a generic army squad, and they get sucked through a portal and they wind up in Monster Hunter World, which looks at first like a big old desert, which is almost indistinguishable from the big old desert they were in at the beginning of the movie, which just makes me think they didn't have a lot of locations options for this. And very quickly, her team gets nabbed by a bunch of Nursillas and killed in a scene that is honestly more horrifying than anything in Paul Anderson's previous Resident Evil movies.
I mean, and Nursillas are giant spider monsters, listeners. So if you're an arachnophobe, maybe go into the Monster Hunter movie with some caution.
Maybe skip the scene where a guy has a bunch of baby spiders hatch out of his chest like a freaking alien.
Ooh,
Oh, yikes.
It is surprisingly gnarly. I was not expecting that, and it was very creaky. But then she teams up with Tony Jaa, another very good action star. Here playing,
Yeah, he's Ong Bak, which makes him automatically great.
and he is the hunter of the film. Like, he's got the great sword. They don't speak the same language, but he knows how to fight, and she quickly realizes, okay, I gotta team up with this guy. And they to fight a Diablos. And that provides like the first chunk of the movie. The second half of the movie is where it gets fun, because that's when Ron Perlman and his blonde himbo wig and pirate ship show up. And they
wait, a ship? Did they do a siege mission against like a Jen Moran or something?
No, I wish they don't have anything that deep a cut. But they do wind up in a more foresty area, and the Meowster chef is in the movie. And
excuse me, I think you mean the Meowscular chef.
The Meowscular chef. My apologies to Mr. Chef. And
I was pushing for Meowscular chef to win RPG side character of the year in our 2018 awards, but then Sylvando happened, and I couldn't stop Sylvando.
Yeah, unfortunately, Sylvando is too powerful for us all.
Too powerful for us all.
But and then that's in that movie the change of scenery is more appropriately Monster Hunter. Ron Perlman chewing scenery is always fun, and they begin working on hunting a Rathalos, which here is some kind of ancient god that also has something to do with the portal that brought Mia Jovovich to Monster Hunter World. And yeah, I don't get it either, but it looks cool. The thing about this movie is like the monster effects are very good, which is like the one thing you have to get right if you're making a Monster Hunter movie. They look like that. Sure looks like a Rathalos.
I mean, Rathalos and Diablos presented properly are just cool, big, giant wyvern dinosaur monsters.
So that totally works. And then the movie ends on a bizarre cliffhanger where freaking Gore Magala shows up. And,
awesome.
And they get ready to fight it, and then the credits start rolling, and I was like yelling at the screen, like, "Oh, come on! You think you're getting a sequel?" But then again, the Resident Evil movie's got 6 sequels, so what do I know?
Paul W.S. Anderson knows a thing or two about making a sequel, so I would, and he has obviously some kind of relationship with Capcom if he made 6 Resident Evil movies.
Oh yeah, the world directors I think were consulting on this movie.
Oh yeah, but probably. Yeah, I mean, probably Ryozo Sugimoto because he's sort of the brand manager / lead producer of Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
But that's the movie I'll probably will have to see eventually. But I'm not that excited because again, I'm not exactly the world's biggest Mia Jovovich or Paul W.S. Anderson fan. But I do respect the hustle of both of them for what they are and what they do.
It is very much one of their movies. And is it good? No. Is it entertaining? Yes, especially if you have buddies. So.
But I'm sorry, Peter. I don't think we're going to have a dedicated Retro Encounter episode about that movie. Not this time.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I think I pretty much went through everything there is to talk about already. So. oh! There's a post credits where the Meowscular chef gets ready to fight the Gore Magala 1v1. That's awesome.
Awesome. The food system in Rise does not have the Meowscular chef or the Grand Meowster chef from Iceborne. Instead, you have a bunch of cats and a girl sing a song about dango, which is again a Japanese rice pastry treat. And the dango system is kind of cool because you sort of choose 3 special upgrades, and then they give you 3 dango to match those upgrades. So you can customize I'm fighting a Zenogre, so I'm gonna ask for thunder resistance on this dango. Like that system is cool, but the cutscenes are cute, but not nearly at the brilliant level of the Meowscular chef, which is, again, I love those Meowscular chef cutscenes so much I wouldn't skip them. I would just watch them every time because he's a giant, fastidious, muscular cat.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely something you just have to watch every time. It's like skipping the game. It's like how you don't skip the Game of Thrones intro if you're watching Game of Thrones for some reason in the year of our Lord 2021. But there's just some.
I'm watching the intro on YouTube is what I'm doing with Game of Thrones in 2021. That's a banger.
I'm absolutely not weeping into my pillow every time I hear that song. But no, there's some things you just don't skip, and the chef cutscenes in Monster Hunter are absolutely one of those things.
Agreed. I don't think I've ever seen food in a game look that good.
Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 looks pretty good, but
in such a manner. I would legitimately get hungry.
There is a Monster Hunter cafe, I think, in Japan. And yes, and I think there was a pop-up steakhouse that served Monster Hunter steaks because cooking a steak out in the wild is something you've done in every Monster Hunter game, to my knowledge, at least since the PSP days.
This YouTuber I follow, he went to Japan one time and went to the Capcom restaurant, and they had Monster Hunter nachos that were on fire. So that's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, okay, if we're talking about Monster Hunter crossing over into Japanese restaurants, maybe it's time to end the episode.
Yeah, maybe we've covered the gamut.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to get excited about Monster Hunter for a podcast because it's been consuming a lot of my gaming time the past, say, 5 or 6 weeks. And Thank you so much for indulging me and acknowledging me, Dom and Peter. It was great talking to both of you because it has been too long since I talked to either of you on a podcast. Don't quote me on this, but something like 4 or 5 months for each of you.
I'm coming back. I'm coming back. It's
Oh.
been a real roller coaster over on my end, but I'm kind of settling in again. So
Oh yeah, 2021 has been a wild ride, and not always the fun kind of wild ride for me as well. But for now, thank you so much, Dom. We gotta exchange some messages about hammering techniques. Peter, you gotta text me every time you fight some crazy new thing. We can make it all happen. But for now, I think we are mostly done talking about Monster Hunter. Listeners, thank you so much for listening to us, alternately gush and complain about Monster Hunter for over an hour. It is something that I have alternately gushed and complained about for, I guess, 13 years now, which sounds about right. But let's talk about my other video game obsession. I should say my other video game multiplayer obsession. Next week we're doing an episode all about Final Fantasy XIV Shadowbringers, the most recent, I should say, Final Fantasy XIV expansion. We've been doing a mini series on the different FF14 expansions over the course of the past year. Peter, you were on an episode about, I think, Realm Reborn with me earlier this year. Is that right?
Yep, I was.
That might have been the last time I was on an episode with you.
I think it was, and since then I've gotten a lot further in 14.
Are you in Shadowbringers? Have you reached it?
I am in. Yep, I'm in the early stages of Shadowbringers now.
Oh boy, oh boy!
I'm very excited to be caught up.
When that episode comes out, Peter, please listen to it, but not after you've beaten the expansion, because there is so much cool in Shadowbringers that it probably needs 2 episodes. But it is only getting 1 episode, and that episode is next week, and it will be the conclusion to our Final Fantasy XIV miniseries on this podcast. But later this month, we are also doing 2 episodes on Nights in the Nightmare, that crazy handheld RPG that blends systems and genres in such a way that I can't adequately explain it in this blurb here. But we're doing 2 episodes on Nights in the Nightmare later this month, and I think it's late enough that we can talk about it. In July, we're doing an episode on Nier Replicant. That's the easy part of this blurb. But in July, Peter, we're doing something that I never wanted to do.
I never thought that I would be doing this again either, and I live every day in fear of it.
It is an episode, one of the most discussed episodes of Retro Encounter, one that people have reached out to me about when we're doing another one, is happening again. On its 5-year anniversary, we are doing another Essential 10 episode. Or I should say 2 Essential 10 episodes. In July, we are bringing back the Essential 10 and trying to come up with a list of top 10 games deemed essential or most recommended by Retro Encounter. I'm not going to say anything else other than that it will be 5 panelists trying to pair a larger list of games down to 10, and I don't know how it's going to happen, and I am slightly afraid about what is going to happen. So, Peter, please hold me, and we shall walk through that scary door together. But a considerably less scary door, or maybe a scarier door, depending on who you are. We are also doing 2 episodes for the first time on Retro Encounter, an Otome game. We're having a special Ladies' Night episode about Hakuoki, which is a popular Otome game set in feudal Japan. And when I tried to do some background research on what Hakuoki was, there were so many Hakuoki games and variants that I was a little bit alarmed. But we're having an all-female team of panelists talk about Otome games in general and Hakuoki in particular in July. I don't know. I'd have to look it up to figure out exactly which Hakuoki game and which remake they're playing. But there is going to be 2 Hakuoki episodes in July 2021, and I have said Hakuoki so many times I'm worried that one of those times I accidentally said hockey.
I didn't hear it, so if you did slip up, I'm
Okay.
sure a reader will email you.
Listeners, if you want to reach out to us, the easiest way to do so is email retro@rpgfan.com. You can also comment on rpgfan.com's message boards or visit our Facebook page, Instagram page, Twitter page, Discord server, YouTube channel, Twitch channel, something streaming every day on Twitch. Please interact with RPG Fan however you prefer to interact with RPG Fan. There are also 3 other fine podcasts on RPG Fan: Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness, Rhythm Encounter mostly about RPG Fan music, and Phoenix Edge mostly weekly about a variety of topics, sometimes current events, sometimes game specific. Listen to those 3 and Retro Encounter at your own leisure, and please leave feedback if you would like to. We love feedback. You give us feedback on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or however you are doing so. But if you want to leave feedback to us as individuals, how do you reach us? Starting with you, Peter.
As usual, you can find me on Twitter at I Have Fury. You can also email me, petert@rpgfan.com.
And Dom, how can listeners find you?
I usually hang around the message boards, or you can find me on the RPG Fan Discord.
All right, and listeners, if you want to find me, the best way to do so is probably Twitter. I am at The Real Monsoon most of the time, at Evoker for Dogs other times, and I am also Monsoon Mike on the RPG Fan Discord, where I'm not there a lot, but I'm always there to post the podcast every week, so that's at least something. But Peter and Dom, I think all of us have hunting to do, so let's get our hammers and our heavy bow guns and our insect glaives and our charge blades and our switch axes and our long swords and great swords and dual blades and swords and shields and hunting horns, and let's go hunt some monsters. Thank you. Good night and good luck.